Chapter 4 Iolinda. The next morning I awoke to the sounds of the slaves preparing my breakfast. Or was it the slaves? Was it not my wife moving up about the room, getting ready to wake up the boy as she did every morning? I opened my eyes expecting to see her. I did not see her. Nor did I see my room in my apartment where I had lived as John Dacre. Nor did I see slaves. Instead I saw Iolinda. She was smiling down at me as she prepared the breakfast with her own hands. I felt guilty for a moment, as if I had betrayed my wife in some obscure way. Then I realized that there was nothing I could be ashamed of. I was the victim of fate, of forces which I could not hope to understand. I was not John Dacre. I was Ericose. I realized that it would be the best for me if I were to insist on that. A man divided between two identities is a sick man. I resolved to forget John Dacre as soon as possible. Since I was Ericose now, I should concentrate on being Ericose only. In that, I was a fatalist. Iolinda brought a bowl of fruit towards me. "Would you eat, Lord Ericose?" I selected a strange, soft fruit with a reddish-yellow skin. She handed me a small knife. I tried to peel it, but since the fruit was new to me, I was not sure how to begin. She gently took it from me and began to peel it for me, sitting on the edge of my low bed and concentrating rather excessively, in my opinion, on the fruit she held. At last the fruit was peeled, and she quartered it and placed it on a plate and handed the plate to me, still avoiding my direct gaze, but smiling a little mysteriously as she looked about her. I picked up a piece of the fruit and bit it. It was sharp and sweet at the same time, and very refreshing. "Thank you," I said. "It is good. I've never had this fruit before." "Have you not?" She was genuinely surprised. "But the ekrex is the commonest fruit in Nakralala." "You forgot, I'm a stranger to Nakralala," I pointed out. She put her head on one side and looked at me with a slight frown. She pushed it back the flimsy blue cloth that covered her golden hair and made a great play of arranging her matching blue gown. She really did seem to be puzzled. "A stranger," she murmured. "A stranger," I agreed. "But," she paused, "but you are the great hero of humanity, Lord Ericose. You knew Necronol as it was in its greatest glory, when you ruled here as the champion. You knew Earth in ancient times, when you set it free from the chains the Eldrin had bound around it. You know more of this world than I do, Ericose." I shrugged. "I admit that much of it is familiar, and growing increasingly familiar. But until yesterday, my name was John Dacre, and I lived in a city very different from Necronol, and my occupation was not that of a warrior, or, indeed, anything like it. I do not deny that I am Ericose. The name is familiar, and I am comfortable with it. But I do not know who Ericose was, any more than you do. He was a great hero of ancient times who, before he died, swore that he would return to decide the issue between Eldrin and humanity if he were needed. He was placed in a rather gloomy tomb on a hillside along with his sword, which only he could wield." "The sword Kanajana," murmured Iolinda. "It has a name, then." "Aye, Kanajana. It, it is more than a name, I believe. It is some sort of mystic description. A description of its exact nature, of the powers it contains." "And is there any legend that explains why only I can bear the blade?" I asked her. "There are several," she said. "Which do you prefer?" I smiled. Then, for the first time that morning, she looked directly at me and her voice lowered, and she said, "I prefer the one that says you are the chosen son of the Good One, the Great One, that your sword is a sword of the gods, and that you can handle it because you are a god, an immortal." I laughed. "You do not believe that." She dropped her gaze. "If you tell me that it is not true, then I must believe you," she said. "Of course." "I admit that I feel extremely healthy," I told her, "but that is a long way from feeling as a god must feel. Besides, I think I would know if I were a god. I would know other gods. I would dwell in some plane where the gods dwell. I would count goddesses amongst my friends." I stopped. She seemed disturbed. I reached out and touched her and said softly, "But then perhaps you are right. Perhaps I am a god, for I am certainly privileged to know a goddess." She shrugged off my hand. "You are making mock of me, my lord." "No, I swear it." She got up. "I must appear foolish to such a great lord as yourself. I apologize for wasting your time with my chatter." "You have not wasted my time," I said. "You have helped me, in fact." Her lips parted. "Helped you?" "Yes, you have filled in part of my somewhat peculiar background. I still do not remember my past as Arakose, but at least I know as much about the past as anyone here, which is not a disadvantage." "Perhaps your centuries-long sleep has washed your mind free of memory," she said. "Perhaps," I agreed. "Or perhaps there have been so many other memories during that sleep. New experiences, other lives." "What do you mean?" "Well, it seems to me that have been more people than just John Dacre and Arakose. Other names spring to mind, strange names in unfamiliar tongues. I have a vague, and perhaps stupid, notion that while I slept as Arakose, my spirit took on other shapes and names, some in the future, some in the past, some elsewhere." I could not explain, but I added lamely, "Perhaps that spirit cannot sleep, but must forever be active." I stopped. I was getting deep into the realms of metaphysics, and I had never possessed any great predilection for metaphysics. I considered myself a pragmatist. In fact, such notions as reincarnation I had always scoffed at, still scoffed at, really, in spite of the evidence such as it was. But Eolinda pressed me to continue what I considered to be pointless speculation. "Go on," she said. "Please continue, Lord Arakose." If only to keep the beautiful girl beside me for a short while longer, I did as she asked. "Well," I said, "while you and your father were attempting to bring me here, I thought I remembered other lives than this one as Arakose or the other one as John Dacre. I remembered, very dimly, other civilizations, though I could not tell you whether they existed in the past or in the future. In fact, the idea of past and future seems meaningless to me now. I have no idea, for instance, whether this civilization lies in the future, that I know as John Dacre, or in the past. It is here. I am here. Perhaps there is only ever the present. There are certain things that I will have to do. That is all I can say." "But these other incarnations," she said, "what do you know of them?" I shrugged. "Nothing. I am attempting to describe a dim feeling, not an exact impression. A few names which I have now forgotten. A few images which have almost completely faded away as dreams fade. And perhaps that is all they ever were. Just dreams. Perhaps my life as John Dacre, which in its turn is beginning to fade in my memory, was merely that. A dream. Certainly I know nothing of any supernatural agencies of whom your father and Katorn have spoken. I know of no Asmoba'ana, no good and great one, no demons or, indeed, angels. I know only that I am a man and that I exist." Her face was grave. "That is true. You are a man. You exist. I saw you materialize." "But from where did I come?" "From the other regions," she said. "From the place where all great warriors go when they die, and where their women go to join them, to live in eternal happiness." Again I smiled, but then smothered the smile, for I did not wish to offend her beliefs. "I remember no such place," I said. "I remember only strife. If I have been away from here, it was not in some land of eternal happiness. It was in many lands, lands of eternal warfare." Suddenly I felt depressed and weary. "Eternal warfare," I repeated, and I sighed. Her look became sympathetic. "Do you think that this is your fate? To war forever against the enemies of humanity?" I frowned. Not quite, for I seemed to remember times when I was not human as you would understand the word. "If I have a spirit, as I said, that inhabits many forms, then there have been times when it has inhabited forms that were different. I rejected the thought. It was too difficult to grasp, too frightening to tolerate. It disturbed Yolinda. She rose and darted a look of incomprehension at me. Not, not as in, I smiled, an Eldarin? I do not know. But I do not think so, for the name is not familiar to me in that respect. She was relieved. It is so hard to trust, she said sadly. To trust what? Words? To trust anything, she said. I once thought I understood the world. Perhaps I was too young. Now I understand nothing. I do not know whether I shall even be alive next year. I think that may be described as common fear to all we mortals, I said gently. We mortals! Her smile was without humor. You are not mortal, Erikose. I had not up to now considered it. After all, I had been summoned into existence in thin air. I laughed. We shall soon know whether I am or not, I said, when we have joined battle with the Eldarin. A little moan escaped her lips then. Oh, she said, do not consider it. She moved towards the door. You are immortal, Erikose. You are invulnerable. You are eternal. You're the only thing of which I can be sure, the only person I can trust. Do not joke so. Do not joke so, I beg you. I was astonished at this outburst. I would have risen from the bed to hold her and comfort her, but I was naked. Admittedly, she had seen me naked once before, when I had originally materialized in Erikose's tomb, but I did not know enough of the customs of these people to guess whether it would shock her or not. Forgive me, Yolinda, I said. I did not realize. What had I not realized? The extent of the poor girl's insecurity, or something deeper than that? Do not go, I begged. She stopped by the door and turned, and there were tears in her huge, wide eyes. You are eternal, Erikose. You are immortal. You can never die. I could not reply. For all I knew, I would be dead in the first encounter with the Eldarin. Suddenly, I became aware of the responsibility I had tacitly agreed to assume. A responsibility not to just this beautiful woman, but to the whole human race. I swallowed hard and fell back on my pillows as Yolinda rushed from the room. Could I possibly bear such a burden? Did I wish to bear such a burden? I did not. I had no great faith in my own powers, and there's no reason to believe that those powers were any more potent than, say, Katorn's. Katorn was, after all, far more experienced in warfare than I. He had a right to be resentful of me. I had taken over his role, robbed him of his power and of a responsibility which he had been prepared to shoulder, and I was unproven. Suddenly, I saw Katorn's point of view and sympathized with it. What right had I to lead humanity in a war that could decide its very existence? None. And then another thought came to me, a more self-pitying thought. What right had humanity to expect so much of me? They had, let us say, awakened me from a slumber which I had earned, leading the quiet, decent life of John Dacre, and now they were imposing their will upon me, demanding that I give back to them the self-confidence and, yes, self-righteousness that they were losing. I lay there in the bed, and for a while I hated King Reginos, Katorn, and the rest of the human race, including the fair Yolinda, who had been the one to bring this question to my mind. Erikose, the champion, defender of humanity, greatest of warriors, lay wretched and sniveling in his bed, and felt very sorry for himself, indeed.